Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm telling you a story about how a simple change in management turned my cushy, early exit job into a daily nightmare, and how I finally fought back not with a resignation, but with a perfectly timed bacon cheeseburger. This is the ultimate tale of how I used my mandatory lunch break to completely blow up my new boss's tyrannical work structure. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Eleanor, but everyone at work calls me Ellie. I'm in my late 20s. And for years, I'd been a field service technician installations, repairs, the usual at a company I'll call Apex Services. I was good at my job, reliable, fast, and I knew the area like the back of my hand. I was one of the veterans, the people who kept the whole operation running smoothly for years. Apex Services ran on the greatest incentive plan I have ever known. When your assigned work is done, you go home. It was a beautiful, simple system. We didn't get paid by the hour. We got paid a flat daily rate, regardless of how long we actually stayed. We had our assigned tasks for the day, and once the paperwork was filed and the truck was cleaned, you were done. For me, this was heaven. My assigned task should have kept me at work until about 3 p.m., but because I'm efficient, I was usually clocked out and walking through my front door by 1 p.m. Yes, I was getting paid for a full day's work, but I was done by lunchtime. I'd spend my afternoons at the gym, walking my dog, or just enjoying my porch swing. It was the perfect life-work balance. The only rule I ever broke was the breaks. We were technically entitled to 2 paid 15-minute breaks and an unpaid 30-minute lunch. But in the race to get home early, breaks were the first things to go. Why stop for 15 minutes when that 15 minutes could be the difference between getting home at 1:30 p.m. and getting home at 1:45 p.m.? It was an unspoken contract between the veteran, the employees, and the old management. We work hard, we stay efficient, and in exchange, we get to go home early. Everyone was happy, and then came Doris. Doris was the new operations manager, and she came in like a wrecking ball wearing business casual. She saw people leaving at 1 p.m. and didn't see efficiency. She saw unpaid labor potential walking out the door. The first thing she did was immediately start adding to our workload. My task that used to take 5 hours, now it was 7 hours. Then she hired a whole bunch of new employees. And I mean a whole bunch. They were slow, they didn't know the territory, and they were understandably lagging behind. Doris decided this was the perfect time to roll out her first new rule. She gathered all the veteran employees and announced, with a tight little smile, that the go home when you're done rule was now modified. New rule number 1. You must go help a new employee before going home. So my 1 p.m. exit time was immediately gone. Now, even if I rushed and skipped all my breaks, I was still looking at clocking out around 5 p.m. It was frustrating, but I tried to roll with it. I told myself, fine, I'm still getting paid the same and I'm helping the team. So I kept rushing, I kept skipping my breaks. I was still desperate to get home as fast as possible. I was a dumb idiot, honestly, letting her structure my day around my own self-imposed rush. But Doris wasn't satisfied with 5 p.m. She wanted control. She wanted us to all suffer together, I guess. A few weeks later, she dropped the hammer. New rule number 2, the one that changed everything. Nobody goes home until everyone is done. This was completely insane. We had a crew of about 30 people now. If 3 of us were done by 4 p.m., but one new hire was still struggling with a complex install until 7 p.m., we were all expected to stay. Our days started stretching longer and longer. The workload kept increasing. The breaks stayed non-existent because I was still trying to be efficient, and every day became a 10, 11, or even 12-hour shift. The whole dynamic of the job had shifted from rewarding efficiency to punishing it. Why hustle? Why skip breaks? The only thing that happened when you finished early was that you became mandatory. Unpaid support for the lagging team. I was getting increasingly angry. I was tired, I was hungry, and I missed my old afternoon life. But I was still out of habit, working through my breaks in a desperate, futile attempt to beat the clock dot. Then came that day. The day I realized the only weapon I had left was the one Doris had actually given me. It was a truly brutal Tuesday. I finished my ridiculously expanded task load. I went and helped one of the mid-level guys who needed an extra hand. And I had 12 hours on the clock. 12 hours of nonstop work, no breaks, no lunch, just moving, lifting, and driving. I was exhausted. I finally pulled the work truck back into the office, ready to clock out and collapse. I get back to the small admin building, and there is Doris, standing by the time clock, waiting for me. She stops me with a hand. "Hold it, Ellie. Where do you think you're going?" I gesture weakly toward the clock. "I've helped my assigned person, and I have 12 hours on the clock. I'm going home." She shook her head, her expression totally unyielding. "There are still workers out, Ellie. Remember the rule. Nobody goes home till everyone is done. You need to get back out there and help them." I felt the blood drain from my head. I wanted to scream. I'd been on the clock for 12 hours, and she was sending me back out into the field. I was so mad I could barely see straight. She then pulled up her laptop and told me who to call. "Call Joe. He's a new hire. He's lagging behind on the Northwood job." I just nodded, numbly pulled out my work phone, and called Joe. "Hey, Joe, it's Ellie. Where are you at on the Northwood job?" Joe sounds defeated. "Oh, hey, Ellie. I'm almost there. I've got maybe 30 minutes of wiring left, but I'm about to pack up and head back now. It's too late to finish today, anyway." I look at the time on my phone. Joe was a 20-minute drive away from the office. He had 30 minutes of work left. That meant if I drove to him, I'd get there just as he was probably wrapping up, and then I'd drive back. I'd spend over an hour of my life in a work truck without breaks, all just to tell a new guy to go home. I looked at Doris. She was standing there, arms crossed, expecting me to jump into the truck and go dot, and then the idea struck me. It wasn't malicious compliance. It was petty compliance. It was an instant, beautiful realization of the one power I still held. The one right she couldn't take away, no matter how many rules she invented. I looked Doris straight in the eye. I put my finger on the time clock, and I gave her a tired but very calm smile. "You know what, Doris?" I said, my voice steady. "You are completely right. I've been on the clock for 12 hours, and if I have to stay and help Joe, I absolutely will." I pushed the button on the time clock. It beeped. I was now clocked out for lunch. I looked back at Doris's stunned face, the smile instantly gone. I said, "You told me I can't go home until everyone is done. You also know that after 5 consecutive hours of work, I am required by state law and company policy to take an unpaid 30-minute lunch. And since I've been on the clock for 12 hours without a break, I could actually be taking 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch right now." I grabbed the keys to the work truck. "Make me stay late, okay? I am taking lunch then." I left the building, got into the work truck, and drove straight down the road, past the turnoff for Joe, and into the parking lot of the closest Wendy's. I had the most beautiful, relaxing 30 minutes of my life. I sat in the sun, listening to music, and enjoyed a hot, fresh bacon cheeseburger and a large Coke. I was quiet. I was calm. I was savoring the most delicious, policy-enforced revenge imaginable. When my 30 minutes were up, I finished my last French fry, pulled out my work phone, and clocked back in. My first act after clocking in was to call Joe. "Hey, Joe, are you still at Northwood?" Joe replied, "No, Ellie, I finished up about 10 minutes ago. I'm already halfway back to the office." Perfect. I drove the work truck back to the office. The sun was setting, and I was greeted by a sight that was pure satisfaction. Doris was still waiting by the time clock. And she was furious. Doris was standing by the time clock, waiting for me, and she looked like a volcano about to erupt. I calmly walked up and parked the truck. She met me halfway across the parking lot. "You didn't go help Joe? You drove past the Northwood site?" I nodded, completely unfazed. "That's correct, Doris. I did not go help Joe. But I told you to. We had a worker out. You had an order." She was hissing, trying to keep her voice down, but failing miserably. I stayed calm, which I knew was driving her absolutely insane. "Doris, you told me I could not go home until everyone was done," which effectively meant I was going to be working past my required shift time. Since I had worked 12 consecutive hours without a lunch or any breaks, I exercised my mandatory right to take my unpaid 30-minute meal period as required by state law. I drove to Wendy's and I ate my lunch. I continued, leaning in just a little, letting the victory sink in. And since my lunch was exactly 30 minutes, I called Joe right after I clocked back in. He was already on his way back. So technically, by the time I was available to work, he was done. Problem solved. She couldn't argue with the law, and she couldn't argue with the timeline. But she could argue with my attitude. "You deliberately delayed going out there?" She spat. That was insubordination. "No, Doris," I said, looking her dead in the eye. That was me taking my required break before I drove the company truck again and risked braking. Safety regulations by working while fatigued and hungry. If you require me to stay for 12 hours, you are required to let me eat and rest. Next time, I'll take my 2 15-minute breaks first, just to make sure I'm well rested before I drive. She was speechless. She knew I had her dead to rights. She had cornered me into working extreme hours, but in doing so, she had activated my employment rights. Rights that she had explicitly told me I could forgo in the past to get home early. Now that the early exit incentive was gone, those rights were back in play, and they were my new weapon. I clocked out for the day, 12.5 hours on the clock, feeling more energized than I had all week. And that, my friends, was the start of a completely new system, a system I built entirely out of spite and mandatory labor laws. The next day, I was completely changed. Why rush? Why hustle? Why skip the breaks? There was no reward. The reward was now guaranteed long hours, so I decided to make those hours as comfortable and easy as possible. My new motto became, "Slow and steady wins the 12-hour race." I started taking my sweet time with my assigned task. I double-checked the paperwork, I drove the speed limit, and I took every single customer service interaction slowly, making sure every detail was perfect. My task now regularly took me until 4 p.m., and here's the key. The moment I was done with my assigned task, I drove straight back to the office. I didn't linger at the site. I didn't call to ask if anyone needed help. I drove straight back and waited for management to assign me the next task, and every single time management tried to send me back out, every single time they pointed to the clock and said, "Go help Joe, go help a new hire," I would walk right up to the time clock, look them dead in the eye, and clock out. "Where are you going, Ellie?" Doris would demand, inevitably watching. "I'm taking my required lunch, Doris," I'd say. "I've been on the clock for 8 hours straight, and I haven't eaten. Or, even better, I'm taking my 2 required 15-minute breaks. I'll be back in 30 minutes to help the team." I would take my lunch, my breaks, or both right in front of management. I would sit in the truck, listen to a podcast, and relax. I would go to the cafeteria and read a book. My efficiency had gone from a virtue to a weakness, and I had weaponized the loss of that incentive. I wasn't going to give them my personal time for free anymore. And the best part? It started to catch on with the other older workers, the other veterans, the ones who had enjoyed leaving at 1 p.m. for years, had been just as angry and tired as I was. They had been skipping their breaks out of habit, hoping for the miracle of an early exit that never came. They saw me doing it slowly, deliberately, and legally taking my breaks at the most inconvenient times for management. And they started following suit. My friend Mark, who used to always be done by 2 p.m., started making sure he got stuck in traffic, taking longer routes. And now he was clocking out for his lunch break at the client's driveway. Another veteran, Lisa, would finish her install, drive back to the office, and when management tried to send her back out to the field, she'd go into the break room and publicly take her 2 15-minute breaks back to back. 30 minutes of sitting and scrolling on her phone, paid right under Doris's nose. The beautiful, efficient system we had was completely destroyed, replaced by a system of intentional inefficiency. The veterans were now working slower, taking every second of their paid breaks, and taking their unpaid lunch at the point of maximum inconvenience for Doris's grand plan to squeeze more work out of the veterans by making them stay until the new hires were done had totally backfired. Why? Because the original incentive, go home early, was far more valuable than the time she was trying to steal from us. Once that incentive was removed, the only logical action was to claim the time and benefits we were legally entitled to. Instead of making us more efficient, she made us all settle into a predictable, easy, and slow pace. Every day is now a 12-hour shift without fail. But here's the difference. It's an easy 12-hour shift. I'm well fed, I'm well rested, and I'm not stressing to meet some impossible deadline. I take my breaks, I take my lunch, and I get paid for every single minute. I've traded my free afternoons for a chill work pace and maximum legal compensation. It's a fantastic, easy shift with a lovely little dose of petty revenge every time I click that lunch out button right in front of management. The company's productivity didn't go up. It cratered. The veterans, who used to be the engine of efficiency, were now the slow-moving foundation of compliance. The new hires were still slow, but now the people sent to help them were also deliberately slow, because why rush when you just get sent back out again? Doris never could figure out how to stop us. She couldn't tell us we weren't allowed to take a break after working 6 hours. That's a labor violation. She couldn't fire us for taking our breaks either. She could only watch as the entire field team settled into a new, comfortable 12-hour routine where every second was counted, every break was taken, and every minute was legally compensated. The old system incentivized speed and gave us free time. The new system incentivized time theft through mandatory breaks and slow, deliberate pacing. The lesson here is simple and applies to any job. Never let management remove your incentives without claiming your rights in exchange. I was a fool for skipping my breaks for so long. I was gifting my employer free time and energy based on a promise of an early exit. Once that promise was broken, the value of my time immediately shifted. My energy and my breaks were no longer things to be discarded for speed. They were valuable, paid commodities that I was legally owed. So if you're out there in a similar situation, being squeezed by management who doesn't respect your time or your efficiency, remember this story. Find the right you have, find the break you are owed, and take it at the exact moment it causes the most minor legal inconvenience to the person trying to take advantage of you. Your time is valuable. Get paid for every minute and enjoy that quiet. Policy-enforced lunch break. Eleanor Ellie leans into the camera, a thoughtful and triumphant expression. If you love this tale of workplace rebellion and you appreciate the sweet justice of petty compliance, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Giving this video, it also helps share the message that sometimes the most effective rebellion is just following the rules to the letter. Let me know in the comments below. What is the most satisfying way you've ever claimed a break or a right from unreasonable management? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.